The Great Hall of the United Earth Council was silent. 300 delegates from every nation on Earth sat in their seats, watching the alien ambassador with tired eyes. They had seen this scene before. They had heard these words before. For 18 long years, the Vethrak Dominion had come to this hall with threats and demands. And for 18 years, humanity had tried to find peace. President Daniel Harris sat at the center of the high table. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and deep lines on his face that told the story of decades spent serving his people. His hands rested on the cold surface of the table. His eyes never left the alien standing before him. Ambassador Keleth was a frightening creature to look at. He stood 8 feet tall, covered in scales that changed color with his mood. Right now, they were a deep red, the color of anger and pride. His forearms were crossed over his chest, and his yellow eyes stared at the human president with open contempt. "Shh. You have 30 rotations to comply with our demands," Keleth said. His voice was like stones grinding together. "Surrender the colonies of New Haven, Prosperity, and Eden's Gate. Remove your people from these worlds. They belong to the Dominion now." Secretary of Defense Maria Santos felt her jaw tighten. She had heard these same demands 100 times. 3 colony worlds, home to 40 million human beings. Families who had built their lives on these planets. Children who had been born there. Communities that had grown and thrived for generations. "And if we refuse?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Keleth's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Then we will take them. Your people will become slaves. Your cities will become ruins. This is not a negotiation. This is your final warning." Admiral Gregory Cole stood near the back of the room. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm face that never showed fear. But inside, his heart was racing. He knew what was about to happen. He had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, working in secret, building something the Vethrak could never imagine. President Harris did not respond immediately. He looked around the Great Hall, at the faces of the delegates who represented all of humanity. He saw fear in some eyes, anger in others, and exhaustion in many. These people had tried everything to avoid war. They had offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They had given up territory and made concessions that hurt their pride. They had watched their ships be raided, their citizens be kidnapped, and their colonies be threatened, all while hoping that diplomacy would somehow work. But it had not worked. The Vethrak did not want peace. They wanted submission. "Ambassador Keleth," the president said, rising slowly from his chair. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "For 18 years, the people of Earth have extended their hand in friendship. We have talked when you threatened us. We have negotiated when you insulted us. We have shown patience when you killed our people." He took a step forward, and something in his eyes made Keleth's scales flicker with uncertainty. "We did this because we believe in peace. We believe that intelligent species should work together, not fight each other. We believed that if we showed you respect, you would eventually show us the same." The president's voice grew harder. "We were wrong." He pressed a button on the console built into the table. Throughout human space, from Earth to the most distant colony, military installations received a coded signal. Commanders opened sealed orders. Pilots rushed to their ships. Soldiers picked up their weapons. "Your Dominion has mistaken our patience for weakness," Harris continued. "You have mistaken our desire for peace as fear of war. Today, you will learn how wrong you were." Keleth's scales had turned pale, a color that meant confusion and the first touch of fear. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that humanity is done talking. I am saying that every raid, every kidnapping, every threat and insult will now be answered." The president's voice rose, filling the hall with its power. "No more talk. Let the war commence." The great hall erupted in noise. Delegates were shouting, some in fear, some in support. Keleth stepped backward, his forearms dropping to his sides. "Cannot be serious," the ambassador said. "Your fleet is small, your technology is inferior. You will be destroyed within weeks." For the first time, President Harris smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had been holding a secret for a very long time. "Our fleet," he said, "is exactly where we want it to be, and it is far larger than you ever imagined." He gestured to the screens that lined the walls of the great hall. They flickered to life, showing images that made Keleth freeze in place. Ships. Hundreds of ships. Massive carriers and sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers and fast attack craft. They emerged from hidden places throughout human space, from asteroid bases and moon factories, from shipyards that the Vethrock had never known existed. "For 15 years, Secretary Santos said, stepping forward, we have been building. Your spies watched our public shipyards and laughed at our small fleet. We were constructing the real Navy in places you never thought to look, Admiral." Cole joined her, his calm face now showing a fierce pride. 300 capital ships, 1,200 support vessels, 2 million Marines trained and ready, every weapon designed to counter Vethrak technology, every tactic developed to exploit Vethrak weaknesses. Keleth's scales had turned white, the color of pure terror. "This is impossible. Your intelligence saw what we wanted them to see," the president interrupted. "We knew you would never respect us. We knew you would never stop pushing, never stop taking, until you had taken everything. So we prepared. Quietly, patiently. And now, Ambassador, your dominion will face the consequences of its arrogance." Guards entered the hall to escort Keleth away. The ambassador would be given a ship to return to his people, to deliver the message that the war had begun. As he was led toward the door, Keleth turned back one last time. "You will regret this, human. The Dominion has conquered dozens of species. You are nothing special." President Harris met his gaze without flinching. "We will see." After the alien was gone, Maria Santos approached the president. Her face was serious, but there was hope in her eyes for the first time in years. "It has begun," she said. "There is no going back now." Daniel Harris nodded. He looked around the Great Hall one more time, at the delegates who had trusted him to lead them through this moment. "Send the orders to all commands," he said. "Tell them that humanity fights today, not for conquest, not for revenge, but for the right to exist in peace. Tell them that we will show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." He turned toward the windows that looked out at the stars. "And may God have mercy on anyone who stands in our way." Vice Admiral Patricia Dunn had waited 15 years for this moment. She stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance, surrounded by officers who had trained their entire careers for a war they hoped would never come. Now it had come, and they were ready. The bridge was a vast room filled with screens and control stations. Officers sat at their posts, their faces lit by the blue glow of holographic displays. Outside the thick windows, the stars hung silent and cold in the endless darkness of space. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, her communications officer, "we have received the signal from Earth. Operation Thunder Road is authorized." Patricia felt her heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. A good commander never showed fear to her crew, even when the weight of history pressed down on her shoulders. "Confirm receipt," she ordered. "And open a channel to all ships in the fleet." She walked to the center of the bridge, where a small platform allowed her to see every station at once. Captain Laura Bennett, her executive officer, stood nearby with a tablet in her hands, ready to relay any order. "Channel open, Admiral," Kevin reported. Patricia took a deep breath. Somewhere out there, hidden among asteroids and moons, inside hollowed-out mountains and beneath the ice of frozen worlds, 300 capital ships waited for her words. "All ships, this is Vice Admiral Dunn," she began. "By order of President Harris and the United Earth Council, we are now at war with the Vethrak Dominion. For 15 years, we have built this fleet in secret. We have trained in silence. We have waited with patience that cost us dearly." She paused, thinking of all the raids humanity had endured, all the lives lost while they pretended to be weak. Today, the waiting ends. Today the Vethrak learn that humanity is not prey to be hunted. Execute Operation Thunder Road. Show no mercy to enemy warships, but remember who we are. We fight with honor. We protect the innocent. We are the shield of humanity. She cut the channel and turned to Laura. Status of all battle groups? Laura checked her tablet. Battle Group Alpha is emerging from the series shipyards now. Battle. Groups Beta through Delta are launching from the Titan facilities. Our forces at Proxima Centauri report ready status. And the enemy? Vethrak fleet positions are exactly as intelligence predicted. They have no idea what is about to hit them. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. The Vethrak had always been arrogant. They believed their spies had penetrated every level of human society. They thought they knew exactly how many ships humanity possessed, exactly where those ships were stationed, exactly how weak their enemy truly was. They were wrong. 15 years ago, when Patricia was just a captain, she had been called to a secret meeting with Admiral Cole and a handful of other officers. They had been shown intelligence reports that made their blood run cold. The Vethrak were not interested in peace. They were testing humanity, probing for weaknesses, preparing for an eventual conquest. The human government had faced a terrible choice. They could continue trying to negotiate with an enemy that did not respect them, watching helplessly as the Vethrak grew bolder and more aggressive. Or they could prepare for war in secret, building a force that could actually win. They chose to fight, but they also chose to be smart about it. Project Ironclad was born. Money was quietly moved through 1,000 different channels. Scientists were recruited to work in facilities that did not officially exist. Shipyards were constructed inside asteroids where no satellite or spy could see them. New weapons were designed and tested in the empty spaces between stars and the regular human fleet. The ships that the Vethrak could see continued to operate as if nothing had changed. They patrolled the same routes, responded to the same threats, and appeared just as weak as the Vethrak expected. It was the greatest deception in human history. And now it was time to reveal the truth. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Tony Reyes from the tactical station, "Battle Group Alpha has cleared the asteroid field. They are moving to engage the Vethrak patrol fleet at coordinate 773. Patricia watched the tactical display as dozens of blue dots representing human ships spread across the screen. Red dots marked the positions of Vethrak vessels, and she could see them beginning to react with confusion as human ships appeared from nowhere. "The enemy patrol commander is sending a transmission," Kevin reported. "He is demanding to know where our ships came from." "Let him wonder," Patricia replied. "All ships, weapons free. Engage the enemy." The first battle of the war lasted less than an hour. The Vethrak patrol fleet, caught completely by surprise, tried to fight back. But they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. Human railguns, enhanced with technology stolen and improved from Vethrak designs, tore through enemy shields like paper. Human missiles, guided by targeting systems the Vethrak had never seen, struck with deadly precision. When it was over, 14 Vethrak warships had been destroyed. Not a single human vessel was lost. On the bridge of the Endurance, Patricia watched the debris field expand on her screen. She felt no joy, only grim satisfaction. This was just the beginning. "Send a message to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them the first engagement was a complete success. Enemy forces neutralized with 0 casualties on our side." Laura moved to relay the order, then paused. "Admiral, we are receiving reports from across human space. All battle groups report successful engagements. The Vethrak are in full retreat everywhere." Patricia nodded slowly. The plan was working. Years of preparation, years of sacrifice and secrecy were paying off. But she knew this was only the first day of what could be a long war. The Vethrak would recover from their shock. They would gather their main fleets. They would strike back with everything they had. "Order all ships to maintain formation and advance according to plan," she said. "We have won the first battle, but the war is far from over. The Vethrak will not surrender easily." She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were watching the news. Learning that their government had been preparing for this moment all along, she wondered what they were feeling. Relief? Pride? Fear? Probably all three. Admiral Kevin said softly, "I have a personal message from your daughter on Earth." Patricia felt a lump form in her throat. Her daughter Melissa was 22 years old. She had grown up while her mother built a secret fleet to save humanity. What does it say? Kevin smiled. She says, "Give them hell, Mom." Despite everything, Patricia laughed. She turned back to her crew, her officers, the men and women who had trusted her to lead them into the unknown. "Hear the lady?" she said. "Let us give them hell." The Endurance and its fleet moved forward into the darkness, toward the heart of Vethrock space, toward a future that humanity would write in fire and blood and hope. The assault on Arcturus Prime began at dawn. Though dawn meant little in the cold darkness of space, Commander Samuel Ortiz gripped the controls of his fighter as his squadron dropped out of faster-than-light travel and into chaos. Arcturus Prime was a Vethrock military stronghold, a massive space station orbiting a gas giant. From this station, the Dominion had launched countless raids against human shipping. Hundreds of human prisoners were believed to be held somewhere inside its metal walls. Today, those prisoners were coming home. "All fighters stay in formation," Samuel ordered through his helmet radio. "Martinez, keep your bombers tight on my wing. Nguyen, watch for enemy interceptors coming from the lower platforms." "Copy that, Commander," Lieutenant Cristina Martinez replied. Her bomber squadron carried enough firepower to crack open the station's hangars, but they needed protection to get close enough to use it. "I see them," Lieutenant Danny Nguyen reported. "Enemy fighters launching from Sector 7. Looks like about 30 of them." Samuel checked his tactical display. 30 Vethrock fighters against his squadron of 18. Normally, those would be bad odds. But nothing about this war was normal anymore. "Remember your training," he said calmly. "Their pilots are fast, but they are predictable. Use the modified evasion patterns. Trust your wingman." The two forces met in a storm of laser fire and exploding metal. Samuel rolled his fighter hard to the left, avoiding a burst of Vethrak weapons fire that would have torn his ship apart. He came around behind the enemy fighter and pressed the trigger on his controls. His enhanced railguns spat a stream of projectiles that punched through the alien ship's shields and hull in less than a second. One down. Around him, his squadron was engaged in dozens of individual battles. The Vethrak pilots were skilled, no doubt about that. They had been conquering species across the galaxy for centuries, but they had never faced an enemy like this before. Human pilots had spent years studying Vethrak tactics. They knew how the aliens would react to every move. They knew the weaknesses in their formation flying and the blind spots in their sensor systems. Most importantly, they had trained against simulated Vethrock opponents until they could defeat them in their sleep. "Bomber run is clear," Christina announced. Beginning attack on primary hangar, Samuel watched as the bombers released their payloads. Guided missiles streaked toward the massive doors of the station's main hangar bay. They struck with blinding flashes, and when the light cleared, the doors were gone, replaced by a gaping hole that vented atmosphere and debris into space. "Hangar is breached," Christina reported. "Marine transports, you are clear to proceed." Far below the fighter battle, a wave of heavy transport ships moved toward the station. Each one carried 100 Marines in full combat armor, ready to board the station and rescue their fellow humans. On the lead transport, General Howard Price checked his weapon one final time. He was too old to be leading assaults personally, but he had insisted. After 18 years of watching humans suffer under Vethrock aggression, he wanted to be there when they finally struck back. 30 seconds to breach point, the pilot announced. Howard looked at the Marines around him. Young men and women, their faces hidden behind armored helmets, their bodies bristling with weapons. They were scared, he knew. Anyone would be scared. But they were also ready. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying through their helmet radios. "There are human prisoners on this station. Families who were taken from their homes. Children who have never known freedom. Today, we bring them home." The transport shuddered as it pushed through the damaged hangar doors. "Move out." The Marines poured from the transport like a wave, spreading across the hangar in practiced formations. Vethrak defenders tried to respond, but they were too slow, too surprised. Human weapons cut them down before they could organize a real defense. Howard moved with his troops, his age forgotten in the rush of combat. They pushed deeper into the station, following the map that intelligence had provided. heading for the detention levels where prisoners were kept. The contact left. Someone shouted. A squad of Vethrock warriors appeared from a side corridor, their 4 arms wielding deadly energy weapons. A Marine went down, her armor breached by a lucky shot. Medic, Howard shouted. Suppressing fire on that corridor? Grenades flew. Energy beams crisscrossed the hallway. The Vethrock fighters were powerful, but they were fighting in close quarters against an enemy that had trained specifically for this kind of battle. When the smoke cleared, the Vethrock were dead. The wounded Marine was being carried to safety by her squad mates. Keep moving, Howard ordered. We are running out of time. They found the detention level 10 minutes later. The doors were locked, sealed with Vethrock security codes that would normally take hours to crack. Sergeant Mee Clark stepped forward with a device that looked like a small computer tablet. She pressed it against the door panel and waited. It's better work, she muttered. The device had been designed by human scientists using captured Vethrock technology. It was supposed to bypass any standard Dominion security system. Nobody had ever tested it in real combat conditions. The door hissed and slid open. Behind it were rows of cells, and in those cells were humans. Men, women, and children, some who had been prisoners for years. They stared at the armored Marines with eyes full of fear and disbelief. It is okay, Howard said, stepping forward and removing his helmet so they could see his human face. We are from Earth. We are here to take you home. A woman in the nearest cell began to cry. She clutched a small boy to her chest, a child who looked no older than 5. Is it really over? She whispered. Howard felt tears sting his own eyes, but he kept his voice steady. The war has just begun. But for you, yes. Your nightmare is over. The Marines worked quickly, opening cells and helping prisoners to their feet. Many could barely walk after years of captivity. Some had injuries that needed immediate medical attention. All of them looked at their rescuers with wonder, as if they could not believe this was really happening. Commander Ortiz, Howard spoke into his radio. Package secured. We have over 200 civilians. Requesting immediate evacuation. Copy that, General. Samuel's voice crackled back. Enemy fighters have been neutralized. Transport ships are standing by. As the Marines led the freed prisoners toward the waiting transports, Howard paused to look back at the empty cells. For 18 years, the Vethrock had taken humans without consequences. They had used them as slaves, as bargaining chips, as examples of human weakness. Never again. He keyed his radio to the fleet-wide channel. This is General Price. Arcturus Prime Detention Facility has been secured. All prisoners recovered. Let every human in the galaxy know what happened here today. High above the station, Admiral Patricia Dunn received the message aboard the Endurance. She allowed herself a moment of fierce pride before returning to the tactical display. The war was going better than anyone had hoped. Across 12 star systems, human forces were achieving victory after victory. The Vethrock, caught completely off guard, were retreating everywhere. But Patricia knew their enemy would recover. The Dominion had conquered half the galaxy. They would not surrender after a few defeats. Ma'am, Laura Bennett said quietly, the Vethrock High Command is mobilizing their main battle fleet. Intelligence estimates they will be ready to counterattack within 72 hours. What? Then we have 72 hours to secure our objectives and prepare our defenses. The real fight is coming. She looked out at the stars, thinking of all the battles yet to be fought, all the lives that would be lost before this war was over. But at least now, she said softly, they know we can fight. High Warlord Thesak stood in the command center of the Dominion flagship, surrounded by screens that showed nothing but bad news. His scales had turned a sickly gray color, the shade of disbelief and growing despair. This is impossible, he said for the 100th time. Our intelligence was certain. The humans had less than 70 capital ships. They were weak. They were afraid. None of his officers responded. What could they say? The evidence was undeniable. Human fleets had appeared from nowhere, striking Vethrock positions across 12 star systems. Military stations that had stood for centuries were now floating debris. Patrol fleets that had terrorized human shipping for decades were destroyed. How did we not know? Thesic demanded. We had spies in their government, their military, their scientific institutions. How did they hide an entire navy from us? Commander Veleth, his chief intelligence officer, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. High Warlord, it appears the humans created a parallel military structure. Everything we observed, every ship we counted, every weapon we analyzed, was a deception. The real fleet was built in hidden facilities throughout their space. For how long? Veleth's scales flickered with embarrassment. At least 15 years, High Warlord. Perhaps longer. Stasok felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Fear. The humans had fooled the Dominion completely. While his ambassadors had been delivering threats and ultimatums, while his raiders had been taking prisoners and destroying ships, the humans had been quietly preparing to fight back, and they had been waiting, patient, silent, letting the Vethrak believe they were winning. What is the status of our main fleet? He asked. Assembling at the Korthak system, Veleth reported. We will have 400 capital ships ready within 48 hours. 400 ships. Even with the humans' surprise advantage, surely that would be enough to crush them. But as Thesak studied the tactical reports, he felt his confidence crumble. Human weapons were not inferior, as intelligence had claimed. They were equal to Vethrak technology, perhaps even better in some ways. Human tactics were not predictable and simple. They were creative and adaptive. Worst of all, human morale was not broken. Every report spoke of enemy soldiers who fought with fierce determination, who never retreated unless ordered, who seemed to believe completely in their cause. The Dominion had spent centuries conquering species across the galaxy. They had developed a simple formula: threaten, intimidate, demonstrate superior force, and watch the enemy surrender. It had worked against dozens of civilizations. It was not working against the humans. Meanwhile, far from the Vethrak command center, a different kind of battle was taking place. Ambassador Catherine Moore sat in the conference room of the diplomatic vessel Olive Branch, facing representatives of two species who had suffered under Vethrak rule for generations. The Crethani were tall, thin beings with silver skin and large dark eyes. They had been conquered by the Dominion 300 years ago, forced to serve as administrators and technicians for their overlords. The Mara were smaller, covered in soft brown fur, with quick minds and gentle spirits. They had been enslaved even longer. Used as laborers and servants throughout Vethrak space, Elder Selvith of the Crethani spoke first. Ambassador Moore, your message was surprising. The humans have always preached peace. Now you speak of war and ask us to join you. Catherine nodded. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. Elder Selvith, we did preach peace. We believe that all intelligent species could learn to coexist. We were wrong about the Vethrik. What makes you think you can defeat them? Asked Mara, Representative Tila, her small voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. The Dominion has the largest fleet in the galaxy. They have conquered everyone who opposed them. They have never faced an enemy like humanity, Catherine replied. We spent 18 years pretending to be weak while we prepared for this moment. Our fleet is larger than they expected. Our weapons are stronger. Our soldiers are motivated by something the Vethrak do not understand. And what is that? Selvith asked. Hope. Catherine leaned forward. The humans fight for something beyond survival. We fight because we believe in a future where all species can live free. A galaxy without the Dominion's boot on everyone's neck. The Crethoni and Mora exchanged glances. Catherine could see the doubt in their eyes, but also something else. A spark that had been crushed under centuries of oppression. A memory of what it felt like to hope. If we join you and you fail, Tila said quietly, the Dominion will destroy our people completely. If you do not join us and we fail, Catherine replied, the Dominion will continue to rule over you forever. Your children and your grandchildren will live and die as slaves. Oh, she paused. But we will not fail. How can you be so certain? Catherine smiled, and there was steel beneath her warmth, because humanity does not know how to give up. We have faced extinction before. We have survived plagues and wars and disasters that should have destroyed us. Every time we came back stronger. The Vethrak do not understand this. They think they can break us with threats and violence. They are wrong. The negotiations continued for hours. Catherine answered every question, addressed every concern, painted a picture of a galaxy free from Vethric tyranny. She spoke of trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, of cultural exchange and shared prosperity. By the end of the day, both the Crethani and the Mora had agreed to join the human coalition. Within a week, 3 more species signed similar agreements. Word spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The humans were fighting back and they were winning. The Dominion was not invincible. On Earth, President Daniel Harris received the news with quiet satisfaction. He was exhausted, running on coffee and determination. But he could not rest while the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Secretary Los Santos entered his office with the latest military reports. Admiral Cole confirms that the Vethrak main fleet is massing at Korthax. They will be ready to attack within 36 hours. Our casualties. Light so far, but that will change when their main fleet engages. Maria paused. Daniel, are you certain about the next phase? The president looked at her with tired eyes. The Vethrak expect us to attack them. They are preparing defenses, planning counterattacks, doing everything they always do when facing an enemy. So we do something different. Exactly. He pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy. We do not need to destroy them. We just need to convince them that the cost of continuing this war is too high. Show them that every system they try to take will be defended. Every victory will cost them dearly. He pointed to a cluster of stars near the border between human and Vethrak space. We make our stand here. Not to conquer, but to demonstrate that we will never be conquered. Let them throw their fleet against our defenses. Let them count the cost. And if they do not stop, if they decide to fight to the end? Harris was silent for a long moment. Then we fight to the end too. But I do not think it will come to that. The Vethrak are conquerors, not warriors. They are used to easy victories against frightened enemies. When they realize this war will be long and bloody, they will look for another way. He walked to the window and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, human soldiers were fighting and dying to protect everything he loved. We wanted peace, he said softly. We still want peace. But now they know the price of our peace. And I think they will find it too expensive to ignore. Maria joined him at the window. The galaxy is changing, Daniel. Whatever happens next, nothing will ever be the same. No, he agreed. It will not. And maybe that is exactly what needed to happen. The Battle of Sentinel's Gate lasted for 3 days. It was the largest space battle in recorded galactic history, and it would be remembered for centuries as the moment everything changed. High Warlord. Desak led his fleet of 400 capital ships against the human defensive position. He expected a hard fight. He expected casualties. What he did not expect was to lose. Admiral Patricia Dunn commanded the human forces from the bridge of the Endurance. Her fleet was smaller, only 250 capital ships, but they held the high ground. Human engineers had spent weeks turning the Sentinel's Gate system into a fortress, filling the space between planets with weapons platforms, minefields, and sensor arrays. The Vethrak came in waves, confident that their numbers would overwhelm the human defenses. They were wrong. Human railguns tore through Vethrak shields. Human missiles found their targets with terrifying accuracy. Human pilots flew like demons, exploiting every weakness in Vethrak formations. And when the Vethrak broke through in one sector, human reserves were there to meet them. By the end of the first day, Desak had lost 60 ships. By the end of the second day, that number had grown to 140. By the third day, his officers were begging him to retreat. We cannot win this battle, Commander Veleth said, his scales pale with exhaustion. The humans fight like nothing we have ever faced. They do not break. They do not surrender. They simply keep fighting. Desak stared at the tactical display, watching another group of his ships disappear in flashes of light. He had conquered 100 worlds in his career. He had broken the spirits of dozens of species. But he could not break the humans. Signal the retreat, he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Pull all forces back to Dominion space. The Vethrak fleet turned and fled. They had come to crush humanity once and for all. They left having lost nearly half their force. On the bridge of the Endurance, Patricia watched them go. She was exhausted beyond words, her body aching from 3 days without sleep. But she felt something else, too, something she had not allowed herself to feel until this moment. Pride, Admiral Laura Bennett said quietly. They are running. Patricia nodded slowly. Signal all ships to hold position. Let them go, ma'am. We are not conquerors, Captain. We defended our space. That is enough. She turned to face her crew, seeing the same exhaustion and pride reflected in their faces. Today, we showed the galaxy what humanity can do when pushed too far. Today we earned our place among the stars. The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had lived in fear of the Dominion for centuries looked up and saw hope for the first time. 3 months later, the war officially ended. The Treaty of New Geneva was signed in a grand ceremony broadcast to every corner of known space. High Warlord Desok, humbled but not destroyed, placed his mark beside President Daniel Harris's signature. The terms were harsh for the Dominion. They would withdraw from all territories they had taken from humanity. They would release every human prisoner immediately. They would pay reparations for 18 years of raids and aggression. They would recognize human space as sovereign and inviolable. In exchange, humanity would not pursue them into their home systems. The Dominion would survive diminished but intact. Some humans called for more. They wanted to chase the Vethrak to their homeworld, to make them pay for every crime they had committed. But President Harris refused. We are not like them, he said in his address to the United Earth Council. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We defend our homes and our people, and then we extend our hand in peace. He looked at the delegates who had trusted him to lead them through the darkest time in human history. The Vethrak attacked us because they believed we were weak. They were wrong. But being strong does not mean being cruel. It means knowing when to stop. The war is over. Let it stay over. After the signing ceremony, Harris stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching Earth turn slowly below. Ambassador Catherine Moore joined him, her diplomatic work finally complete. The other species are requesting formal alliances, she said. The Crethani, the Mara, half a dozen others. They want to know what humanity will do with its power now. Harris smiled tiredly. The same thing we have always wanted to do. Build. Explore. Learn. Help those who need help. And if another species makes the same mistake the Vethrak made, if they mistake our kindness for weakness, the president turned to face her, and for a moment, his gentle expression hardened into something fierce. Then they will learn the same lesson the Vethrak learned. Humanity offers friendship first. We seek peace before war, diplomacy before battle. We are patient and forgiving beyond what most species can understand. He paused, looking out at the stars that humanity now claimed as their own. But we are not to be threatened. We are not to be bullied. We are not to be pushed into corners and told to surrender. Any species that tries will discover what the Vethrak discovered, that when humanity decides to fight, we fight with everything we have, and we do not stop until we win. Catherine nodded slowly. A message for the galaxy. Promise, Harris corrected. We want to be friends. We want to work together to build something wonderful among these stars. But if anyone tries to destroy what we are building, they will face the consequences. A month later, Patricia Dunn retired from the Navy. She had given everything to the war, and now she wanted to rest. At her retirement ceremony, she was awarded the highest honors humanity could give. Medals and titles that would be remembered for generations. But when reporters asked her what she wanted to be remembered for, she did not talk about battles or victories. She talked about the look on the faces of the prisoners they had rescued from Arcturus Prime. She talked about the messages of hope from colonists, who no longer had to fear Vethrak raiders. She talked about her daughter, who could now raise her own children in a galaxy where humanity was respected. We did not fight because we wanted war, Patricia said. We fought because we wanted peace. Real peace, not the false peace of submission and fear. And now, finally, we have it. 5 years after the war ended, the first Vethrak ambassador arrived on Earth. He came not with threats and demands, but with offers of trade and cultural exchange. The Dominion had learned its lesson. President Harris, now serving his second term, welcomed him personally. "Ambassador," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of friendship, "I hope this is the beginning of a better relationship between our peoples." The Vethrak looked at the human hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out with one of his own 4 hands and took it. "We underestimated you," he admitted. "We will not make that mistake again." Harris smiled. "Good. Because we would rather be your friends than your enemies. We would rather build together than fight. But we will never again pretend to be weak." The ambassador nodded, understanding the message clearly. Humanity had entered the galactic stage. They had proven themselves in the fires of war. And now, with that proof behind them, they could finally pursue what they had always wanted: a future of peace, exploration, and hope. But everyone remembered the day when that future was won, the day when the human president declared, "No more talk. Let the war commence." And the galaxy learned what happens when you push humanity too far.